Good evening, everyone. We are ready to start the program. Look at this full house. This is fantastic. I see some of you standing in the back. There are a few chairs left here in the front. It's, as our friend Joe Tregesser here says, it's not like church. It's okay. You can sit in the front pew. We won't bite. Well, thank you for everyone very much for being here tonight for this very special event. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm the Director of Communications here at the Heartland Institute. The Heartland Institute was founded in 1984 in Chicago by a group of economists and other smart men who met regularly to discuss the value of free markets and the need to promote those ideas to the general public. But not from Washington, D.C. or New York City, but from right here and to an audience in the heartland of America. And our mission since that founding has been to discover, develop, and promote free market solutions to social and economic problems, to shrink the size and scope and power of government, and to increase individual liberty, and to encourage prosperity through vibrant free markets. And that's why it's a real treat and a perfect fit to have the guests we have in the Andrew Breitbart Freedom Center this evening. If you like what you see tonight, and I really expect that you will, whether here in person or watching the live stream here on Facebook and YouTube, I encourage you to check out heartland.org, our website. Check out our newly relaunched blog, The Freedom Pub. Check out our Heartland Daily podcast, which you can get at iTunes or on our website. It was listened to 1.3 million times in 2016. And you can also check out our YouTube page where this event will be instantly archived, so you can send it to your friends. And you'll see a lot of talks like this, and we do these about every week here in the Andrew Breitbart Freedom Center. And I hope you'll talk to friends and also come into yourself to enjoy the Michael Perry Mazur Memorial Library, which we're now up to almost 14,000 volumes, I think, of books about liberty and economics and freedom. And it's a research library and a great place for students to learn and a great place for you to donate your books if you have books on economics and liberty and freedom, very much like the book we're talking about tonight, which I'm sure will be hitting our shelves very soon. We accept those donations, and you can talk to any Heartland staffer to find out how we can take those off of you and put them in a great place, which is our library. And if advancing freedom is important to you, and if you're here, I really hope it is, I hope you will join us in the Heartland Institute with our mission. We'd love to have your support so that we can keep putting on programs like this and keep fighting for liberty and freedom in public policy in the United States and, frankly, all over the world and in all areas of public life. And if you'd like to support us right now, an impulse buy, we have something called the Dip Jar, which is a shiny green alien-looking thing at the exit table there. Very quickly and very securely, you can swipe your credit card in there and give us just $10, $25. It really goes a long way to helping us do the things that we need to do here. And if you'd like a really cool gift for a young person in your life, or you want to talk about liberty and maybe get in a conversation at the gym next time you're there, we have T-shirts for sale for $10 with champions of liberty on it, like Hayek and Milton Friedman and Martin Luther King. And so check them out in the where you got your food today. I think you might like them. With that out of the way, and thank you for your attention, it's now my pleasure to introduce tonight's speakers. Brent Hamachek is a business owner, entrepreneur, Turning Point USA Advisory Council member, author of 6 Turning Point USA campus publications, a frequent public speaker, an energetic champion of liberty. Please welcome to the stage Brent Hamachek. And our second speaker is Charlie Kirk. He's the founder and executive director of Turning Point USA, a national student movement dedicated to identifying, organizing, and empowering young people to promote the principles of free markets and limited government. If you've scanned across any cable news network in the last 2 or 3 years, you've undoubtedly seen his face. He's been on Fox News, CNBC, and Fox Business Network over 200 times, offering badly needed fresh perspective from a millennial who understands liberty that our society really needs. And he's maturing into one of the most important voices for freedom and liberty of his generation. Please welcome a dear friend of the Heartland Institute, Charlie Kirk. And this is the part of the program where I turn it over to Brent. He and Charlie are just going to talk about their book, Time for a Turning Point. I hope you get your copy now, and I'll be back to help direct questions and answers. Take it away, Brent.
Thank you. Thanks for everybody for coming here tonight. Really appreciate it. A lot of familiar faces. A lot of faces that are people that I know who I invited to come here, not to see me, but because all of you heard the same message, said you've got to come and hear this young guy speak. And so I appreciate for the folks I know, thanks for showing up. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Of course, that's up to you. I mean, you might disappoint them. It's unlikely.
I could.
So we're sitting here at the Heartland Institute, which is a special place for Turning Point, because way back when, before you put me to work writing stuff, you needed literature. And there's a story here. So tell everybody about the early days with Turning Point in Heartland.
Absolutely. I just want to reiterate the thanks to the Heartland Institute and the incredible work that Jim and Joe Bass do here. So Turning Point USA, for those of you that don't know, we're a nationwide student movement. We fight for free markets and limited government on about 1,100 college and high school campuses across the country. And as we were trying to get our start, we needed kind of partners in the cause. And Jim and Joe were one of the few organizations that didn't laugh at the idea of an 18-year-old trying to start an organization from nothing. Instead, the Heartland Institute was a partner from day one to help us with supplies and material and assistance and goodwill, and really helped start a movement on our college campuses. And I think we ran them out of their famous booklet, Obamacare Disaster, which was great. We were happy to do it. And to this day, we're just really thankful for the partnership, and this is just a fitting place to be in the Andrew Breitbart Freedom Center, which was also the first national article I published was on Breitbart.com, actually exposing District 214 textbooks. So it all comes back home here today, right? So it's a very fitting Heartland Institute, Breitbart, and also sitting in, I guess this is District 214 still, so it's very, very fitting. So I went to Wheeling High School, for those of you that are local. So.
Terrific. So with regard to Heartland, also, it's worth noting that when the book was first coming out, and we sent out some emails to different folks saying, hey, here's what we're doing, and thought you might be interested, it took the Heartland Institute all of about 5 minutes to write back and say, hey, let's have an event and have you come out and do what we're doing tonight. Some of you know we were going to do this back last October, but one of the two of us was busy working on a presidential campaign and couldn't make it, so here we are tonight, and we'll get back to that.
We will. We'll tell that story.
So we're here to talk about a book, but let's jump straight to the headlines, because there's news over the past week, past few days even, about the kind of resistance Turning Point is facing on campuses right now. You were on Fox and Friends this morning to talk about it, and what I'd like you to do is share with people just what you're seeing. I mean, we talk about it in the book, but it's current and it's timely, so what's going on?
It's been a long week today. I guess that's what the expression is. I woke up in Miami. At least they say it. I woke up in Miami. So we've been kind of battling, as many of you saw what happened at Berkeley last week. That is not an isolated incident. That's just one of the more public, more visible examples of the intolerance that's happening on our colleges and universities. The campus left, they disguised themselves as a very tolerant, diverse, loving people, but they're anything but that. They're actually some of the most intolerant people that you'll ever encounter anywhere across the country. And so our organization has a stated goal to start as many chapters as possible to train as many activists around the values of free markets, limited government, and the Constitution. Not necessarily, I would consider, controversial issues, not even conservative issues. These are founding principles. And so our amazing activists that attended our training seminars were so fired up, they said, you know what, we want to start a chapter at our school in California, Santa Clara University. And so they go and they file all the paperwork, they raise the money to help get the deposit that's needed, they get the professor to sponsor the organization, they get the petition signature requirement, and so they submit the paperwork. And the Student Government Association that oversees the process to become an official student group on campus said, not so fast, we need to have a special hearing just on this organization being formed on campus. There's a lot of concerns being raised. And thankfully, one of our activists actually had the wherewithal to record the proceedings that occurred. So just a couple nights ago, this was last Thursday, they had this meeting at Santa Clara University where literally like a Senate judiciary hearing, our 6 Turning Point USA leaders were berated and were just unbelievably character assassinated for just trying to start a Turning Point USA chapter. There were 300 students that showed up at Santa Clara University in opposition to try to start a group that would just start for free markets, fight for free markets, limited government, and the Constitution. What then ensued was we got this whole thing on film, was faculty members and professors coming out and saying the presence of this organization on campus will result in violence, will result in white supremacist organization, even though 3 of the members were Hispanic. I don't understand how they could possibly, that takes some very interesting leftist contortionism to figure that one out. How did it end? They voted to deny, from a vote to 18 to 10, the ability and the right, which is a basic constitutional right, the right to assemble on this campus at UC Santa Clara, of a vote 18 to 10. The final decision that was written by the Senate president, I put in quotes because these are not real positions, it's just kangaroo court, was they do not represent the values of Santa Clara University. Now think about that. Literally they're saying, we just disagree with you, therefore you should not be able to assemble. Think about how intolerant of a group of people it takes to do that. Now mind you, we're present on 1,000 campuses across the country. We will fight for the right for a socialist organization to exist. We don't agree with them, but they should be allowed to assemble. They should be allowed to speak freely. But they don't want us to be able to exist. And so the left hates the idea that there are other ideas. They hate that there are people that might disagree with their worldview. And this is just another fitting example. And what I love about this example, unfortunately our students are going to, have to go through even more character assassinations from their peers and their fellow students. But what I love about this example is it shows in its totality the intolerance of the campus left. Because this was not just an off-the-cuff remark from a professor. This was institutionalized. This was a 2-hour hearing where 6 professors, 3 teacher assistants, and 10 faculty members went out of their way to testify against the creation of an organization that would fight for free markets, limited government, and the Constitution. And these students at Santa Clara, these Turning Point activists, are modern-day heroes for sitting through that. Literally, that would have lasted about 13 seconds in my book. I mean, you kidding me? For these Hispanic kids to be called white supremacists because they want to start an organization around free markets, limited government, the Constitution. We've got the whole proceeding on film. Fox and Friends has covered it. Drudge Report. You can Google it. Just type in Santa Clara. It's the #1 result. We made it that way. So not exactly the nicest depiction of their university. Going through an appeal process. We'll probably lose the appeal because it's more kangaroo court, and then we will sue them. And I think we'll win. But this is just an example of what's going on in our campuses. I wish that was an isolated incident. If you have 6.5 hours, I can go through every single example that's happened in the last couple weeks since the inauguration of how our students have been targeted physically, been targeted organizationally, targeted culturally. There is a culture to intimidate, silence, and suppress conservative ideas and opinions on campus that has just gone to another level since the inauguration of our president. And so we are on the front lines of that. And I think we're not going to back down. We're going to double down. And because if we don't, that's just going to give the left exactly what they want.
And it's not just since the election, it's been going on since they started. Some of those stories are actually told in the book, which is a great segue to talk about the book. So we have a book. Some of you have it in your hand, Time for a Turning Point. It was January 2nd, a year ago, that you picked up the phone and called me and said, okay, let's do this. Why write a book? I mean, you're running around changing the country in the first place. What do you need a book for?
Right. Well, first of all, I just want to say some thank yous to this room, not only to the Heartland Institute, but of course to my parents that have been so supportive since the beginning. They've been amazing. And to Bill Montgomery, where's Bill? Is Bill back there? Bill's been amazing. Who believed in this organization and this movement since day one. And of course, I have to say thank you to the co-author, Brent, who is incredible to this whole process. So I called up Brent, someone who we worked on about 6 campus publications on, and Brent helped us a lot on messaging. I said, all right, I want to write a book, but I have a problem. I don't think I have the time to get it done in the time period I want, but I think I could co-author it. I'd be honored to work with you on it. And Brent and I think very similarly on this. And really the idea was there's so much noise going on in this presidential cycle, and I think that what Turning Point USA was fighting for was so unique and having such remarkable progress and success that it needs to be documented. It needs to be synthesized so that people can learn from it, be inspired, and really act upon the proven messaging and the values and principles and ideas that we really put forth. And this book is a book that first talks about kind of the success stories of Turning Point USA, starting from nothing, just right down the street here in Wheeling, Illinois, growing to a national movement on 1,100 college and high school campuses, cataloging that story for part of it, but then also not just doing the typical political book, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, which is 3 things that are wrong with America, my life story, an inspirational tale, and kind of I'm going to run for president one day, please buy my book. That's kind of the Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Nikki Haley, typical cookie cutter popcorn political book. Instead, why don't we talk about our ideas in a way that people can believe in, really painting the future. And that's what we did in this book. And made bestseller in 6 categories on Amazon while we were both kind of busy during the election. So we were happy about that.
Yeah, I work for a living, and he runs around and saves the country. So we're busy. But one of the things that we start the book with is a section we call Setting Our Premises. And part of that is talking about Turning Point, talking about Charlie. There's a little bit of autobiographical stuff in there because people want to know who he is. But one thing that's been interesting for me, when I've talked to people who have read it, they ask a question that I don't know the answer to, and I know it's not in the book. We talk about stuff that happened to you in high school a bit, some of the experiences, but everybody asks, was there a moment where you knew you were going to do this? And I say, you know what? I don't know. I'll ask him. I'll be at the Heartland Institute with him in a month. So what is the answer to that?
Yeah, it's not as well defined. I mean, I always had a passion for politics. My life kind of took a weird turn where I wasn't sure what I wanted to do after high school. Wanted to go to West Point, didn't get in. And I wrote that article for Breitbart.com exposing that all the D214 textbooks were written by Paul Krugman for economics, and they were wrong. I mean, there was like pages of just factual inaccuracies. And Breitbart picked it up and went national, and then Fox News picked it up, and that's kind of how I started to get on Fox News when I was in high school. And then I just said, well, maybe there's potential here to start a movement. And the people here in this room were just incredibly supportive. And I think that's a lesson. It would have been very easy to just kind of scoff and to be very condescending. And I mean, Brent included, to Bill Freck, to Bill Montgomery especially, who believed and said, no, you can start this movement. You can do it, even though you're 18 and the world says you can't do it. It's pretty amazing. And so it would have been really easy to just kind of talk down to and say, there's no way this can happen. But it was less about the movement that was created and more about the movement that was ready to happen. There's an old analogy. Is it when someone walks across the slope of a mountain, is it the sudden movement that starts the avalanche, or is that the avalanche was waiting to happen? And that's kind of the analogy that we use. It's just all the pieces were lined up. The youth of this country is so fed up with just institutional leftism that a countercultural movement that used messaging in a way that could talk directly to a millennial audience, that was actually peer-to-peer messaging system, was really successful, and we were been blessed to be part of that for the last couple of years.
One of the great stories in the book goes back to when he first started Turning Point and went down to the 2012 Republican convention with Bill Montgomery, thinking when he got there he could buy a ticket. And lo and behold, got there and found out there was no room in the inn. And for perspective on what Charlie's done, 4 years later, he spoke at that convention and then worked with the campaign afterwards. That's a hell of a 4-year run. So in that first part of the book, Setting Our Premises, we create a vision for America that's called The Life of Julio. And it's generated from people who have read the book a lot of interest. Tell everybody about The Life of Julio, what we were trying to do with that.
So I remember when I was a senior in high school, my economics teacher at Wheeling put up a PowerPoint, and she was very far to the left, and she said, this is the society we're trying to build. And it was the thing called The Life of Julia, and it was produced by the Barack Obama campaign, which was a real a tale, an interactive website created by Barack Obama, 2012.com, which actually showed cradle to grave socialism, essentially, a woman that was taken care of at every little instance and turn by government handouts, whether it be federal Pell Grants or whether it be welfare assistance or Medicaid. It's just like every single moment of her life she needed government assistance. And my economics teacher at Wheeling said, this is the society we're trying to create so that every person can be taken care of. And I always found that to be so disturbing. Like, that's not what this country is about. We're not about just redistributing our wealth to a higher degree so that people can be taken care of. We're about aspiring to something and achieving and taking risks and being entrepreneurial. And so when Brent and I were kind of talking about how do we paint the picture for what we freedom believers believe in, because obviously that worked for the collectivists, we said, well, why not we create something different? And then Brent suggests, why not The Life of Julio? So we actually create a story in the book. It's a narrative type story that goes on for about, 15 pages almost, that talks about our principles in action in a story form. So it's Julio, who is born in a poor family that can go to a charter school thanks to vouchers. Julio that then becomes an entrepreneur thanks to the local trade schools that he goes to, and he starts a business and he becomes successful and he helps other kids go through college and he earns some wealth and he never actually stops working and he becomes very philanthropic and he becomes a mentor and he never ever stops creating and taking risks. That's more the American story that we all believe in, not just this cradle to grave socialism that Barack Obama was trying to say, we're going to take care of you from the government from the moment you live to the moment you die. And so I think we do a really good job in the book of portraying that.
So Charlie gives me too much credit. The truth is, the fun part about the Julio story is that I didn't come up with the idea. We actually came up with the idea at exactly the same moment on the telephone. We spoke over each other, which is interesting. And
It's
we
true.
do this a lot. And I like to tell people when I'm trying to describe this strange relationship that I have with somebody 31 and a half years younger than I am, it's not that we agree on things, it's that we think exactly the same way. So we sort of process data the same, which ought to scare you to death, by the way. But the Julio piece, when we came up with it, Charlie's idea was, let's make it like the pencil story. We all know, most of us know the pencil story that Milton Friedman made famous. It wasn't his, but he used it, all those different things that go into the pencil. So Charlie said, let's take all those different things that go into a life led in freedom. And by the time we outlined it, we said, look, if we can actually write to the quality of the idea of the outline, we've got lightning in a bottle. And I think based on what people say when they read it, we probably did.
I think that's right, and I mean, from people that you and I really respect intellectually, say that's the most moving part of the book, and it really gives individuals that are saying, what is the society we are trying to create as freedom lovers? Because the platitudes are great, lower taxes, okay, we know what that will result. What does it look like as a society in narrative form, in a very molecular level, in one person's life journey? That is the hero's journey of someone who starts with nothing, that can then pull themselves up by the bootstraps, that has a society that is embrace of freedoms, that person can take risks and create wealth for themselves and the people around them, then give back and continue to be a contributing member of society for the rest of their life. Unlike contrasting that with the Barack Obama vision, which is someone who is, a government employee their entire life and is always dependent on government handouts and welfare and never actually tries to aspire or create anything and just lives a very mediocre lifestyle, never trying to be aspirational in any sense. And we really decided that's not what this country is supposed to be. And we articulate that in the book.
So once we give you Julio's story, then we spend some time showing how to make Julio's life actually happen. And that next piece is, what are the tools that we employ to do that? And in that part of the book, we talk about the Constitution and first principles. We talk about the fairness of free markets and the effectiveness of free markets. By the way, in the room is a fella by the name of David Shestokas over here who wrote a book. He's quoted in our book, Constitutional Soundbites. The same book was translated into Spanish. I don't dare try to say that, but he was a big help to us, and his work was heavily leaned upon in our book, so thank you, Dave, for that. I would encourage everybody to get a copy on Amazon of Dave's book. But in any event, the fairness and the effectiveness of free markets. Talk about the fairness piece, because you're passionate about it, and it's the argument that's not made often enough. We're supposed to be made to feel ashamed and dirty somehow that we believe in the production and accumulation of wealth.
Right, and what's so interesting about all this, as I say it, this parallels the same trainings and the messaging that we do at Turning Point USA with all of our members. So that this book, in some sense, was a culmination of all the different messaging components that we have used throughout, the last couple years and why we've been so successful. And so at Turning Point USA, we say we are going to be the most unapologetic defenders of capitalism in the history of campus activism, period. And we're not afraid of it. I mean, capitalism is the greatest, and it was never actually created. It was more discovered. It's the greatest system ever discovered and allowed to be experimented upon in the history of man. It has lifted more people out of poverty, given more people opportunity than any other system ever tried in the history of mankind. And so from a very fairness perspective, we talk about in the book checks and balances, about how actually in a true free market, the best regulation is competition, that when two companies are competing against each other, a product or a good or a service will immediately become better because the consumer is going to demand a higher quality product, higher quality good. We ask in the book, why is Apple coming out with a new iPhone every 6 months? Haven't they made enough money? Because they're afraid that Samsung is going to cut them under, and they're going to lose market share. They're going to lose money. They're going to lose profitability. Why is it that Uber keeps on coming out with new variations? Because they're scared that Lyft is going to cut them under. They're going to lose market share, and they're going to lose profitability, so on and so forth. We talk about the taxi cab unions, how people never dreamt in their wildest imagination 10 years ago that transportation could be redefined. We had a very two-dimensional view of transportation, that the only way to get around is you own a car or you call a taxi, they're going to rip you off, and that's it. But then Apple saturated the marketplace with smartphones, and some entrepreneurs said, well, why can't you have a car on demand when you want it? Because cars are only used about 2% of the time anyway. And they completely redefined the way we looked at transportation. That is the fairness and the effectiveness of free markets. And so when you talk about that to a millennial generation, and in a very real sense, they can understand that, because I go and I speak at a lot of college campuses. I say, how many of you remember Blockbuster? They all raise their hand. Is anyone mad that they went out of business? Of course not. Well, I mean, you all have Netflix. You can just stream it directly on your iPhone, right? And what we're really talking about is that was actually the most fair output possible, because it's about efficiency. And the struggle of economics is always actually trying to limit scarcity. That's actually, if you want the bottom line definition of what we are trying to do as a society, is how do we limit scarcity? And Netflix versus Blockbuster, scarcity of time. I don't have to go in my car to get a VHS tape, in 10-degree weather, rewind it. I might forget it. Now I just can stream it live on my device. And that saves you time, it saves you money, it saves you energy, it saves you simplicity, more variety, more options. I don't remember people rioting the streets when Blockbuster went out of business, but that's what we talk about, the fairness and effectiveness of free markets, the pursuit of efficiency, the pursuit of trying to limit scarcity in all of its different means and measures. And so we have many, many examples in the book, and we kind of try to talk on a very, I would say, universal level, so that it doesn't take someone with any previous understanding of economics to be able to run through this book, but also someone who might have a doctorate in economics. They might say, I never thought of it that way. I think we've accomplished both. It was a tough needle to thread, because we were trying to talk to two audiences at the same time, but the response has been overwhelmingly positive that we accomplished that.
So I hope that someday everybody in this room has their favorite Charlie Kirk story. I have one, and it relates to this, and I have to share it because it goes beyond the book, but it's part of the book. But it talks about leadership and somebody who just has it. So I had known Charlie only for a few months, and we went out to breakfast one morning because he knew I'd buy. And I'm kidding, actually. But we sat down, and he said, I've got an idea. And he said, last year Bono gave a speech, the guy from U2, was impressed that you knew Bono, gave a speech at Georgetown where he said he was done donating money to third world countries that didn't embrace free market principles. He said if there's no sort of free market solution, the money just gets poured down the drain. He said Bono made the statement that poverty's the disease and capitalism cures. He said, here's what I said, I'm familiar with the speech. He said, here's what I want to do. I want to write for our campuses a social justice argument for capitalism, and I want to build it around that Bono message. What do you think? I said, sounds brilliant. I think it's terrific. It's a great idea. He said, good. I want you to write it. And I looked at him and said, what any 50-year-old business guy would say to some kid, I'd say, okay. Then I said, how do you want me to approach it? What do you want to say? And he said, I don't know, figure it out. But just do the capitalism cures thing, the Bono thing, we'll make this work. And I responded, oh, okay. So we outlined it, and we wrote it, and now it's been translated into Spanish. It's the most popular publication of Turning Point. It's become like a cornerstone. Here's the story. It's not about me. It's not even about the book. It's about somebody that much younger than I was telling me to do something that crazy, spotting maybe the ability to do it, and saying, do it, and having me say, okay, that's remarkable, and that's it. That's a special thing. So I know there's going to be a ton of questions in the room. We've only got a couple more minutes, but I need to wind you up a little bit, and we're going to hit your favorite topic, because after we talk about the tools we need to employ, after we talk about how to message millennials and young people and all those things, we talk about the roadblocks that can stand in our way. And the biggest one, the first one that we mention, is what we call the game of loans. And that is this corrupt circle that exists between universities and the government and getting students in debt. It is your passionate subject. Just riff a little bit.
Sure. It's also my favorite title. I love Game of Thrones. So that's how we kind of came up with it. So we talk in the book a lot, and this is an issue that we encounter a lot on college campuses. And I mean, this could be a book in and of itself. In fact, it is a booklet in and of itself. is I believe the single greatest financial liability facing the millennial generation is the vast misunderstanding of the student loan bubble and quite honestly this bipartisan agreement to financially bankrupt the next generation personally through taking out a ridiculous amount of individual student loans while promising in the distant future that you might get forgiveness from the federal government while never actually wanting to deliver it. And so we talk in the book a lot, and we also talk through our kind of Turning Point USA outreach of how corrupt this system actually is. And we go through the history of the student loan kind of bubble in this country and how it used to be if you wanted to go to a college campus, or go to a college in general, you had to go to the local bank, you had to put on a suit and tie, you had to justify to your local banker why you wanted to go to that school and why you wanted a lower interest rate, what you were going to study, and how you were going to pay it back. Now you just have to go online and you can borrow $40,000 in debt before you even realize it, literally, through FAFSA. And we make the comparison, which is an accurate one, which is the current student loan system, which has not been reformed by whether it be Paul Ryan or Nancy Pelosi. They're both as equally guilty. It is no different than the 2008 financial crisis that we saw in the mortgage lending industry. The average student loan liability in this country is $32,000 per borrower. And I say that word per borrower intentionally because a majority of the student loan liability in this country is held by people that never graduated college. So a majority of people actually take out a bunch of money in student loans, they enter college, and they exit. They just hold the student loans, they don't get a diploma, and they're kind of lost. They're directionless. And those are the individuals that never should have ended up going to college in the first place. We make a very bold claim in the book that we believe too many people are going to four-year colleges and universities. We believe that a majority of them are artificially supported through cheap, low-interest student loans and federal Pell Grants. College and universities should be going through market forces, no different than business institutions have to. Many of these colleges would never be able to turn profitability if it wasn't for federal government subsidies. The endowments are completely tax-free, which is a great point. Ohio State University, which is a state school, has a $5.5 billion endowment. They've raised their tuition every single year for the last 30 years. They have not once used a cent from their endowment for tuition assistance. Harvard University has a $51 billion endowment, tax-free, of course, from the federal government. They keep on raising their tuition. They don't dip into their endowment ever for tuition. How is this possible? Because there's an artificial record demand where we believe in this country still that you have to get a four-year degree to be successful. I lived it personally. I still haven't gotten my diploma, and people still say, well, you know, once you go there, then you can actually be successful. That's wrong. You don't need to go to college to be successful. I don't believe that. I believe that if you want to become in certain fields and certain trades, absolutely yes. But to teach that to our youth, I think, is wrong, misleading, and actually very dangerous in more ways than one. And so it's very synthesized down. We ask a high school senior, where are you going to school, not why are you going to school. When that happens, young people feel they are obliged to go take out a bunch of money, go directionless into college. The college graduation rate nationally is 59%. That means 41% of students that enter college will not graduate, and a majority of those students will actually exit college with more than $40,000 in student loan debt, and they are worse off leaving college than when they entered. They have lower self-esteem, they're directionless, they have student loan liability, and they really are not sure what they want to do with their life. We need more carpenters and plumbers, electricians, entrepreneurs, and risk takers, less social scientists and medieval historians that have a bunch of student loan debt. And I understand Starbucks is doing a very bold claim to try to forgive a lot of student loans. This is a problem that we see in our organization. We have over 6 employees that have over $110,000 in individual student loan debt. They know they're never going to pay it off. $110,000 in student loan debt. They're lucky enough to be working for our organization. We're lucky enough to employ them. I feel bad for them. They say they didn't really get much out of their college degree. They would have loved to have gone to a 2-year community college, maybe done a little bit differently. It's different for everyone. We're not saying college is a bad thing, but we do believe that it's a bubble waiting to burst. And when you have this many people lining up to go to an institution that is not producing something of equal or returning value, there's something wrong with that, especially when the federal government is subsidizing it to such a great extent. The final point, the second biggest lobby in Washington, D.C. is the higher education lobby. They have 1,400 full-time lobbyists. On average, that's about 3 full-time lobbyists per member of Congress. This is why you never see any sort of reforms or cuts or any sort of adjustments towards the amount of the hundreds of billions of dollars that go towards these universities. UC Berkeley receives over $134 million a year in federal assistance. That's 61% of their entire budget. They are a federal government institution. So I have great hopes. I know personally Betsy DeVos. I hope she does a great job and that she really starts to disrupt this. I hope that President Trump does what he said he's going to do and go after the higher education cartel, because that's what this is. Students are really being bought into this system that is needlessly expensive and not delivering return for the students' time and money and treasure that they're putting into it. So it's something we talk very passionate about in this book.
But he doesn't feel strongly about it.
That was subdued, by the way. You should have saw me in West Palm Beach.
So here's the interesting piece, because Charlie's talking about the students and the young people. Here's our obligation as adults, because just think about this for a moment. And I know this is true, that Charlie still has people, adults, grown-ups, like most of us in this room, who will come up to him after having started the largest campus organization in the United States, after having successfully helped a winning presidential campaign, and they say, gosh, Charlie, when are you going to get your college degree and start with your life? What in the hell else is there for him to do? So we have an obligation, we think, also, and we talk about it in the book, the obligation of parents to help their kids make good, wise choices about how they're going to pursue that educational piece and what they do with it and just how useful
And I got to
it
give
is.
credit. My parents allowed me to do this crazy thing. Most parents wouldn't, so it deserves a lot of credit. So, absolutely. So,
So-
I did want to talk about the presidential race. We could take questions too, but
Yeah.
if you wanted to kick it off, because I know you know.
Yeah,
Actually ties
so-
in the Heartland event too.
Right. So when we mentioned at the beginning that we had to postpone the one in October, it's because Charlie was working on the campaign, especially the last 60 days. So there's a great story here. Don't tell all of it or they won't buy what we're writing next. But give everybody a feel for what that was like.
So if I never had this experience, it still would have been an unbelievably blessed year in more ways than one. And this experience I'm about to describe was a God thing that really came together, right place, right time. I was at a Dallas-Fort Worth fundraiser for Trump for president. And I met a very passionate guy by the name of Gentry Beach that is just one of the most optimistic, forward-thinking people I've ever come across. And we hit it off, and he says to me, he's like, hey, you should really get more involved with the Trump campaign. I said, that's fine. I've reached out, but I don't know. It's like, no, I can get you involved. I'm like, yeah, I heard this before. He's like, no, seriously. He's like, I'm the godfather of Donald Trump Jr.'s kids. And he's the godfather. I'm like, oh, wow, that's cool. And so, and as they say, the rest is history. And he really brought me into the inner circle. Thankfully, Bill Montgomery and everyone at Turning Point was able to keep the ship sailing seamlessly throughout this process. But I really dedicated my life the last 70 days of the campaign to kind of becoming the go-to millennial guy on the Trump for President campaign. And traveling the country with Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump, of which was an amazing once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, putting together millennial events on college campuses across the country, working with them on messaging. The millennial agenda that Donald Trump actually gave at Ohio State University was taken almost word for word out of this book. And it's true. You could actually look at it and compare. There was, when we first started, there was little to no millennial outreach happening at all in the Trump for President campaign. Believe it or not, their website did not have a portal for millennials. We created that in the first couple days. That was the first step. We brought Donald Trump Jr. to over 32 college campuses. My favorite is bringing him to Michigan State University. 8 days before the election, we had 2,600 students show up for the president candidate's son. Think about that, Donald Trump Jr. Hillary Clinton got like 600 candidates. At that point, we said, we're going to win Michigan. We're going to win it bigly, believe me. And we made that call. And we won the state of Michigan by 9,000 votes. It was a thrill, and it was a culmination of all the amazing experiences that Turning Point put together, the campus network we helped build, the messaging credibility, the energy, the enthusiasm, and just being able to kind of have the reins of a presidential campaign where Don Jr. and Eric would say, all right, Charlie, you have Tuesday and Friday. We want to go to college campuses. So this is where the Heartland comes in. I was kind of in the midst of all this, and they said, all right, Charlie, Saturday, we want to go to Florida, plan out this whole day, and that was the day we were supposed to have our Heartland event, and I have to thank the Heartland for being so understanding. I was just like, I'm really sorry, I can't do this. Like, we have to postpone the event. I have to go down, and we went down to Jacksonville and Tallahassee and Orlando hosted 3 massive millennial events for Don Jr., brought him to a 4,000 person event at Florida State University, a 6,000 person event in Jack. So it made a difference in the state of Florida. And I think understanding at that short notice that. And leading up to Election Day, Politico asked me for my prediction, and I tweeted it out, and I said that I believe Donald Trump is going to win, and I think he's going to win Michigan. I think he's going to win Pennsylvania, and I think he's going to win all these states. And I got everything right, but I didn't call Wisconsin. And one of the journalists responded, who I will not name, and said, "So we've received all these submissions and all this. It wasn't from Politico; it was from another place. You have the most optimistic view of what's going to happen tomorrow. The next closest, because I predicted 304 electoral votes for Trump. And they said that the most optimistic we have for Trump's like 272. Do you really want us to run with this?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." And they said, "Well, this might really ruin and damage your credibility." And so then I email them back. I was like, "So did the people who said Hillary's going to win 340 electoral votes, did that really ruin or damage their credibility?" But even though I predicted it, I didn't actually believe it deep down. It's true. I actually, it still hasn't sunk in that he's president of the United States, and I think we're all better for it, because it would be unimaginable the disaster that Hillary Clinton would be for this country.
So we got to take questions for Charlie, and I say for Charlie, by the way, I want to let everybody know in the room, I know nobody has any questions for me. It's just fine. Ask Charlie the questions. But what I do want to say, without betraying specifics or people or other things, here's what I can tell you. We were at a conference in West Palm Beach before Christmas, the Turning Point Advisory Council, and we had a very special appearance by a very special person who made it very clear to us that there was a strong opinion that if it weren't for the work that Charlie Kirk did, the presidential election would have ended differently. Go ahead, let that sink in. So you're sitting in a room with a young guy you ought to have a bunch of questions for, because this accomplishment is remarkable, beyond description. So thanks for letting me write a book with you, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it's on. And thank you, Charlie, for giving us Donald Trump. Appreciate that very much. Actually, I do have
You could take that a couple ways, the way you said that. I don't know.
lots of different viewers we have for this on the live stream, that's for sure. I do have a question for you, Brent, and I'm just going to get out of the way just like it was in West Palm Beach. What's up with your socks, dude?
Oh, thank you for asking. Yellow socks here. Everywhere I speak for Turning Point, the kids always describe me as their best dressed speaker. Everybody wants to know where I get my stuff. I bought the socks at Nordstrom's. So there you go. There's my one question for the night. Thanks for asking.
All right, you can take a powder, go to the restroom or something. All right, now if you have a question here in the audience, please put your hand up, and one of our staffers will come to you, and then you'll be the next person. I'm going to take the first question online, though, actually. Steve is watching the live stream on YouTube, and he asks, how do you explain socialist Bernie Sanders' electoral success among young people?
Good question. So we encounter this a lot, and so first and foremost, I think Bernie's appeal was made stronger by the lackluster appearance and just the whole candidacy of Hillary Clinton. I think if there was a stronger Democratic nominee, Bernie Sanders wouldn't have been as appealing. When you're in college and you have very little understanding of economics or world history or anything, the idea of this very utopian society that can be created if we just readjusted tax rates and had a different healthcare system and everything will be better can be somewhat appealing. And so Bernie Sanders, in a lot of different ways, paralleled that of what students were hearing in their professors and their lecture halls. And young people, in particular, were the driving force behind the Bernie Sanders revolution. However, we have found that there really isn't much of a revolution, and our organization takes a strong stance against socialism. And so my favorite moment is when you encounter a Bernie Sanders supporter, here's how to blow up their worldview in 10 seconds or less. And we train on this, by the way. We say, go up to them and ask a Bernie Sanders supporter, or ask him if you ever get the opportunity, do you trust the government? And they will say, of course not, I don't trust the government. Then the next question you should ask is, then why do you want to make it bigger? And they say, well, we're going to I don't. oh, well then you must not be for socialism then, because everything you stand for, you pretend to stand for, is to make government bigger. When in reality, the revolution was built on the same sort of feelings that propelled Donald Trump: disgust at the system, misrepresentation from Washington, D.C., the betrayal of the D.C. political class. It wasn't necessarily full-fledged Bernie Sanders, doctrinaire socialism. What we have found on these college campuses, when presented with a different idea, the allegiance that young people have towards the label socialist, they will flee to the hills when presented with a better idea. So.
Very good. All right, first question is going to be right here. Jan?
Hi, I'm Jan Sleater, and I've been a supporter of Heartland for a very long time and Turning Point for a while. Now, about 2 summers ago, there was a young woman summit, and it was local here, and a few people, not necessarily nationally known speakers, and there were 200 something, 300. Last summer was more like 500 to 600 with nationally known speakers. My question is, this time around, how many young women are you expecting, and who might be some of the top speakers?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Talking about our Young Women's Leadership Summit, we're expecting around 1,000 young women. It'll be in Dallas, Texas. So if you have any young women in your life, please go to our website, tpusa.com. They can apply right there on the front page. We're going to be announcing some very, very bigly speakers soon. That's all I can say. Believe me, they're going to be really big. I just can't say it quite yet, but there's some really, really big names coming. So.
And it's really exciting and fun to see that many young women excited about free markets and economics, and one of the t-shirts is, I don't need the government to succeed, and it's got a picture of Margaret Thatcher on it.
It's great, yeah. And so this is something unique that we've created. We also have our Young Latino Leadership Summit, our High School Leadership Summit. Young women in the conservative movement have never really had a home like that we've created at Turning Point USA, and we're going to grow that. It's going to be, in the next couple of years, we want thousands and thousands of young women to go through our leadership training programs. So.
We have a question right here. Please identify yourself so that they know who they're speaking to.
I have the question about the university you're going to. Are you really going there, or are you doing this online?
Well, I go to Prager University, which... yeah, I don't know. That's a little outdated. So I was taking online courses at the King's College of New York City. Got a little sidetracked. That's okay. I will end up getting my degree eventually. But
Saving the free world isn't a bad way to kill time.
saving Western civilization is not a bad daily task. So.
I have 3 years of high school, 3 years of university, and some graduate courses. I have grammar school diploma. And I only take a job if they require a college diploma.
I will say this, though. The number one reaction I get when I say I don't go to college is people usually say, good for you. So it's kind of things are changing quickly, I think.
We have a question over here. Please identify
Yes.
yourself first. Please.
I'm Mike Weissman. Charlie, growing up, were you always aimed in this direction, or did you yourself have a turning point? What was it?
I always loved politics, was always very passionate about it from a young age. Milton Friedman, Ayn Rand, F.A. Hayek played big influences. I was debating teachers for as long as I could remember. So,
Right here.
Yeah, hi, my name is Paul Chasen. I got 2 questions. One, you're on 1,100 campuses. How many more are still out there that you need to get to? And then the second question is, you mentioned Uber as a great example of free market and efficiency. I'm curious your thoughts about the CEO disengaging from the Trump circle.
So we're on 1,100 high school and college campuses. High schools are going to be a big growth opportunity for us. We have a lot more high schools that we think we can grow to, and there's about 2,900 college and universities, so we still have a lot of growth that we can do in growing pre-existing groups and chapters and strengthening them, something that we really want to be involved in. To the answer to your Uber question, I think it's typical left mob rule where they try to bully these CEOs from stepping down from these advisory boards, and I think he made a mistake. I don't understand why he would step down otherwise and just leftist politics. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Hand the mic for a second. So this is the way I get to talk, is that Charlie gets a question, but I like to add something. So with regard to the Uber piece, I think it's important for everybody in the room to remember something. We think about, and we cite examples in our book of companies like Uber and Google and Starbucks and others that are great successes inside the free market system, where people used entrepreneurship and the tools available to start something to create jobs and wealth and success. Just because you use the system doesn't mean you're a supporter of the system. Let's not confuse somebody being a capitalist with somebody using the system of capitalism. To be a capitalist, you don't have to be a business person. It's a philosophy and a belief system. So you can use it, you can profit from it, but it doesn't mean you're a defender or a believer. So what we're seeing here with Charlie is somebody who's a defender and a believer. Everybody in this room can be a capitalist. All you gotta do is raise your hand and sign on. But just because you use the system doesn't mean you're philosophically in support of it.
Question right over here.
Hi, I'm Larry Greenberg, and this may be a little obscure, but one of the sources of power of on the left, such as you've described at Santa Clara, is this business of intersectionality, where each of these aggrieved leftist groups seem to interlock and support each other. So my question to you, are there other groups with whom you can ally to be more powerful in numbers and in terms of complementary philosophies to make your side of the argument win?
Yeah, that's a great point. And so this is something the left has done very well, which in essence on campus they make victimhood be a virtue, and where essentially that if you feel as if you're oppressed, you are entitled towards a different government benefit or handout, something of that nature, whether it be Students for Justice of Palestine or whether it be the Black Student Association or the Muslim Student Association. Other groups that we can have intersectionality with, Greek Life is a great partner of ours. So the fraternities and sororities, ROTC. So it's really groups that are more business-minded, more pro-American, more pro-free enterprise, that aren't as focused on this kind of victimhood mentality that is being taught in our schools and reinforced through the culture. So.
Question in the back.
How you doing? Mark Weiermiller.
Mark's a great guy, by the way.
I've known Charlie. I tell the story. I've known Charlie since he was young, like a year ago. Actually, I met him about 5 years ago with the Mitt Romney campaign. So just
right.
an update. There's 510 views on one of the Facebook pages right now.
There we
so
go.
There's like hundreds of us in this room, and then there's 510 watching right now on
That's
Facebook.
great.
So this is very exciting. My quick question. So I don't know if you're following the New Trier High School.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Diversity
Unbelievable.
Day, Seminar Day. Nancy Thorner here in the front row wrote a great story about it on Illinois Review. But I wonder if you have any quick thoughts on just what we should do as citizen activists, that they're forcing this so-called diversity, and it's actually more about dividing us and about control and everything else. So what are your thoughts?
So I joked around about Prager University, but we are doing a big partnership with them, Turning Point and PragerU, and I have a video coming out where I talk about what is true diversity, what is diversity actually mean. And we make a very compelling argument that diversity is not skin color, it's actually diversity of ideas and thought and principles and values and perspectives and different ways of viewing things. And that is lost in a lot of these high schools and colleges where they want everyone to look different but think the same, that they think that's what diversity is, that diversity is skin color. That's not true diversity, actually. And so at New Trier, when they have these classes where they're trying to teach diversity, it's all just leftist dogma. If you have 10 people that all look different, but they all have the same perspective on a particular problem, that's not a very diverse group of people. That's just a group of people that look different. And so to answer your question with New Trier, what you should do about it, I mean, the citizen activism that's been rising up, for those of you that don't know what's happening, Mark could fill you in more. I'm a little bit briefed on it, but it just sounds like a day-long leftist indoctrination camp that essentially these students have to go through, the problem with whiteness and all this crazy other stuff. I don't know if that was actually one of them. Was it? It was like white guilt. Yeah, white guilt was on them at New Trier. Can you believe it? White guilt at New Trier. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's remarkable. I can't even. I should probably reserve some of my thoughts there. So.
All right. We have a question here in the front.
Hi, I'm Ann Brennan. I've been a supporter of the Heartland Institute since the beginning, so I'm happy you're here. I had a question about funding, and it's sort of related to the student loan thing. So, one, I'm curious, who are your biggest supporters? Not necessarily, the largest supporter, but is it coming more from millennials? Is it coming more from baby boomers? And then related to that, I think a curious thing about the U.S. is how can so many parents of children in college allow their children to go into debt? I just, so I don't know. My generation's certainly been brainwashed too. I just don't understand it. So I wonder if you could comment on
Well, the
both.
first question, someone slipped in the back. Mike Miller's back there, one of our biggest donors and supporters, so that answers part of it. He's a great guy. He's been phenomenal since day one. Many other people. So we have 5,000 donors across the country. We were blessed enough. We raised over $5 million last year. We have over 100 people on our field staff and growing. We're going to probably raise more than that this year, and put on over 100 different conferences and events. Have 1,000 people at our Young Women's Summit, largest Young Latino Leadership Summit, high school leadership conference, and do a lot of other stuff that some more private programming that some of you are attuned to that has high effectiveness. And so the outpour of support from patriots across the country has just been overwhelming. Yeah, it's broad-based. It's small dollars. It's big dollars. It's foundations. It's $5 donations. You name it. And so it's alumni. It's just benefactors. It's incredible. It really is. And so we've been so blessed and thankful for that. The second part of it is we have become a culture that is okay with debt, and become okay with debt at a younger and younger age. And the FAFSA, which is the Federal Student Loan Service, they literally incentivize students to take out student loans. And this disproportionately affects black neighborhoods and black families, because they have quotas where they have to get a certain amount of black students to fill out these federal student loans. And so they go to these at-risk schools to actually incentivize them to go to colleges that are not very good colleges in the first place. So Chicago State's a great example, where they will go to the south side of Chicago, and they will really be very deceptive in the way that they make these students fill out these student loans, and then they end up going to a school that's not very good, and they drop out, and then they have the student loan liability, and it doesn't compute. So even if they might have had a bright future going out of high school, there's another barrier they have to overcome. Some would call it a scam. I would, but it's very deceptive. Whereas less than 15% of students in college can tell you the exact amount of money that they owe. There's a very simple bill that's been introduced in Congress that has been filibustered by Republicans and Democrats, which is the right to know before you go. Believe it or not, this has been filibustered by Democrats. McConnell, that guy, refuses to put this to a vote, which says that a student has the right to know how much money they're borrowing before they borrow the money, the right to know how much you have to pay off per month. Now, why is that? Some would argue, I would argue, that there is a lot of people benefiting from this system, this broken system, both Republicans and Democrats, and they don't care about students' futures. Marco Rubio introduced the Right to Know Before You Go bill, which essentially says that before you take a federal student loan, by the way, if you just so you know, 93% of all student loans come from the federal government. It was less than 20% 20 years ago. So we have nationalized our student loan industry. It's a federal government program. Students don't even know how much money they're borrowing while they borrow it. They don't take parent it takes a lot of piecing together different information. It doesn't take a parent cosign in a lot of different instances. You could do it in your basement in 20 minutes or less and get $50,000 in debt and go study something that you're not going to make a lot of money in the future. And that's a problem. And we, the taxpayers, are the ones that are paying for it.
It's funny, insult to injury with your favorite guy, Dennis Prager, today said on the radio, the amount of money given to these universities, $46 billion last year.
Right, and so the final thought on this. So, the question was the amount of money that goes to these universities from the federal government. I mean, so it's the donors that keep funding it, but also the federal government. So this is important, though. So even these universities, and the Democrats are very misrepresentative of this. They say, oh, the Republicans want to cut research funding. So, for example, a research grant at UC Berkeley, over 70% will go to administrative overhead. So when the federal government is just funding this administrative albatross, the money's not even going to the research. It's not even going where it's supposed to go. It goes to pay for all these paper pushers and bureaucrats that protect their own serfdom that they've created in these universities. So if one line in an appropriation bill that Betsy DeVos can implement is that no dollar of federal funding will ever be used for administrative overhead. And that will change things very quickly. So.
I was just going to say, to tease the folks in the room who want something a little intellectual, in the book we actually go all monetarist on you in talking about this and do the whole price equals money supply times velocity. And that's what's going on in the higher education system. So they don't want the kids to know what they're borrowing, so they borrow more, so the prices go up because there's more money at a more faster rate of speed, chasing the educational opportunities. The schools get to raise their rates. The government pumps in more money. And there you go. Milton Friedman was right. That could be a T-shirt.
That's right. One more thought on that, which is all checks and balances of a real market system says that one of two things should be happening. Less people should be going to college or the price should be going down, and neither of those things are happening. I mean, in a market, either you're delivering a product that has a equal or greater return on investment, which many colleges are not, or the price goes down to compete better in the marketplace, and tuition keeps on going up. So there's something disruptive, and that means the price system is not communicating prices properly, which means it's very corrupt, which the federal government is disrupting the price system through subsidies, federal Pell Grants, or low-interest student loans, which we have happening right now. And I still cannot comprehend, and I agree with President Trump where he campaigned, and we helped put this in his platform, which is endowments should not be tax-free. They should be used towards tuition assistance or taxed at a clip of 80%. They should not be tax-free. They shouldn't be tax-free. They should not be tax-free.
Question right here, then I'm going to go to one online, and keep your hands up, and we'll get another
Hi.
one.
I have a suggestion I'm going to get to, but first I have to tell you a story about the University of Chicago 35 years ago. My son and my daughter were undergraduates, along with Diane and Joe Bast. And on the campus at that time, there was a socialist group called the Young Spartacus League. And not only was the socialists organized, but the counter-socialists were also organized under the name of Capitalist Imperialist Running Dog Society. And whenever the Young Sparks, as they were known, had a demonstration, the running dogs would come and demonstrate on the demonstrators. And they brought the system down through humor. So now to my suggestion. I suggest that you hire a cartoonist, a stand-up comedian, and laugh them into oblivion.
I agree completely. I agree. So that's a perfect segue. I have to talk about this. So there's 4 things we talk about in the book that every person in America should be aware of, which is safe spaces, microaggressions, trigger warnings, and free speech zones. These 4 things are crumbling Western civilization as we know it. So the first thing, microaggressions, trigger warning, safe spaces, free speech zones. So microaggressions. A microaggression on a college campus is when you say a term, phrase, verb, noun, adjective that is insulting to a particular cultural or ethnicity group that offends them to such a certain extent that they feel unsafe, but you didn't know you were actually making that insult. So for example, a microaggression at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire is the phrase, in America, if you work hard enough, you can succeed. That is a microaggression to immigrants, okay? At UCLA, the phrase, America is the greatest country in the history of the world, is a microaggression towards foreign students. Those phrases are disallowed on these particular campuses. If you think I'm making this up, Google microaggression right now. They are all across the country. They are literally censoring speech. Okay, that's microaggression. Trigger warnings. Trigger warning is if you do not give after a certain list, then you can be suspended and in a literature class. It is a requirement in Oberlin College when they're studying The Great Gatsby to say, trigger warning, we're about to encounter vast income inequality that resembles third world countries. I am not kidding you. You can Google these examples. A trigger warning, they exist on all across the country. Also across the country, you will be disciplined and kicked. She or he, you have to use sie or za. Kidding you. You can Google this as well. That you are no longer allowed to use gender pronouns on colleges all across the country. You might say, yeah, that's crazy. Ivy League. Well, no, actually, the University of Wisconsin. Progressions, we did safe space includes Play-Doh, cookies, milk. If you think I'm making it up, folks, Google it again. Well documented. For those of you that know this, you're nodding your head. Teddy bears, nice music. physical place on campus that you can go to if you heard different thoughts, opinions, ideas that disagree with yourself to such a certain extent that you needed the coddling that only a young child would need. When George Will visited Harvard University, across the hall they had a safe space because so many students were offended by George Will. Come on, George Will, are you kidding me? It's not exactly, that incendiary of a speaker. He's going to talk about the Cubs? I mean, give me a break. And so finally, free speech zones, which are physical locations on a college campus where you only in that area at a pre-described time and a pre-approved process can you then speak freely. They're usually no bigger than a batter's box, and they have to be approved through a single person that is usually a far left-wing socialist, that is the jury, judge, and executioner, and if you're conservative, you can only be there between the hours of 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., and they still will police your speech. Outside there, you can't speak freely, and the First Amendment need not apply. This is happening on hundreds of campuses across the country. I wish I was being over-exaggerative of these things, but I'm not. And it is erosion on free speech and just decency and group of people to put together.
Richard Campagna, he says, Charlie seems to suggest a major breakthrough to the
I actually looked around our organization. I was like, wait a second. Joanna had read
policies and their procedures, so violations of process. So you take them to court, you win, they pay for your lawyers. And then there's been overt violations of the First Amendment, so free speech zones, microaggressions, trigger warnings, and you sue them and take them to court and you win and they pay for your lawyers. So now they're getting a little more creative. I think they were doing these overt violations because they had Barack Obama and Democrats in charge, and they were told, hey, it's okay, we won't do anything in elections, we're going to pull your funding. I think so the university administration will silently sit back and ignore it while the faculty organizes violent protests, while they establish rules that say if your club might incur a violent protest, then you have to pay for increased security or some kind of deposit. And so we're now getting into a situation where every time Turning Point has its monthly meeting, they might have to pay $5,000, and $80,000 a school year is I don't think there's any club or even combination of two clubs that would have that kind of budget.
Right, and I mean, a quick example is we brought Milo, who I agree with some of the stuff, disagree with some of the stuff that he says, but nevertheless, we brought him to DePaul University. DePaul made us pay a couple $1,000 in security fees. We paid it, we raised the money for it, donor paid for it. Mike Miller helped chip in. The event comes, Milo walks on stage, 35 Black Lives Matter radicals storm the stage, and the security stands there and does nothing. We paid for the security, and they don't even do anything. Never got our money back, sued the university, eventually sent us the money back. Milo never spoke because it was such a ruckus. They didn't want to do anything. They didn't want to offend anyone or disrupt anything. So we are literally in a war on these campuses, and we are willing to use every legal avenue possible, whether it be legal lawsuits, or whether it be the public pressure, or whether it be even more creative ways to try to advance the ideas of free speech and free markets on these campuses.
Time for a few more questions. Be sure to put your hands up. We got one right over here.
Yeah, unfortunately, the microaggressions you speak of not only happen on college campuses, but in like Chicago public elementary schools. For example, my little 12-year-old sister, they were having a conversation on Muslim immigration and if we should allow them to cross our borders and come into our country. And my little sister made a comment that what was it again? Anyway, she had they had a few Muslim students in the class as well, and apparently they somehow managed to offend the kids, and one of the little girls went crying to the teacher, and it was just a shit show. And well, I thought it was, because my sister got suspended, and I was just, when I first heard this, I was just standing there saying, is this some kind of joke? Because she's a 12-year-old. And they were saying something about my sister threatening other kids. And I was laughing, unfortunately. It's not something most people would do, but laughing because if this is the future, then I'm kind of worried here, and I'm in high school.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question and the comment. And we see it happening more and more at a younger and younger age, policing speech and policing thought. And I think Trump was successful because he said political correctness is ruining our ability to speak freely if it's a good idea. Next thing you know, the Santa Clara happens where they're offended by capitalism and you shouldn't exist. And that's happening, where it's now politically incorrect to believe just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right.
Here's the problem. We can sit in this room, are going to get suspended from a grade school class. They're going to get...
And a lot of young kids do like him. And so anyway, owners actually, have jobs, and they found out that 98% of the faculty were Democrats. And I don't think they were onto the gig, and that's the thing. It's getting the word out that these professors and this
applaud him for what he's done. Safe areas, and it sounds like it's all mental, but